Well, for 15 years, I've been letting Barry's dad beat me in golf. And I never knew that I'd get something good out of this, but I got Barry to invite me up here mainly because I've been letting his dad beat me in golf for 15 years. One time a few years ago, I was playing Barry's dad, and he's a good golfer, and he does beat me most of the time. But I said, I'm going to beat you today. And he says, I'll beat you with one club. And this is really insulting if you're a golfer. He beat me with his 5-iron and his putter, and he shot 84 and I shot 85. He used one club. Many years ago, Reagan was going towards a summit with Gorbachev, and he told this story. And his advisors said, don't do it. There could be an international incident. And Reagan, as was his way, did it anyway. And he tells this story. It seems there was an accountant in Moscow who had saved up for many years to buy a car. And in those days, the cars were only made by one manufacturer, the government. And he goes in, he'd saved for many years, and he sat down with the bureaucrat, and he says, well, I've saved enough to buy a car. And the guy said, well, yeah, that's great. Come back in about 10 years when it's ready. And the accountant didn't miss a beat. He said, well, will that be on a Tuesday or a Wednesday? And the bureaucrat said, you idiot, I told you it's going to be 10 years, and you want to know what day of the week? And he said, well, the plumber's coming on Tuesday, and I don't want to miss him. Well, people say when they, hear that story, they say, well, that's the Soviet Union. That could never happen here, right? I mean, we could never have the government owning the automobile industry, right? We now have a new company, or what's left of an old company, GM, but you know the new name for GM, right? Government Motors. And I think we're in a good territory where I don't have to be defending GM too much in this part of the state. I tell people when it's interesting when you look at the comparison, Toyota sold 9 million cars last year and GM sold 9 million cars. That's a pretty good sales for GM. Why can't they make money? Something's wrong with their business model. But it's so wrong that if you're selling 9 million and not making money and you're in the middle of the recession and you're going to probably sell 7 million, there's no way you're going to make money on it. You have a bad business model and you have to start over. Many of us have been saying that it is bad. It's bad when private business fails, but it's part of what we call creative destruction. It's the way the marketplace allocates and distributes goods efficiently is only those who make a profit end up surviving. The restaurant business is a good example of that. 9 out of 10 restaurants failed, but do we want to have a government rule that says they all succeed and that no one goes bankrupt? No, you have to have rules, and you'll have to allow the marketplace to sort these things out. But with the automobile industry, the interesting thing is that we now have, and what they have done is, we have what I would call arbitrary law. When Chrysler went bankrupt, we had rules. We have rules for bankruptcy. I know we have a young attorney here. There are rules you're supposed to go by. These rules are there for a reason, because not only are they there to make an orderly process of a dispute, they're there so investors know that they can invest as a preferred bondholder. So you had a preferred bondholder. You had the pension fund, the Teachers Pension Fund of Indiana, invest in Chrysler. And then what happens? Chrysler goes bankrupt, and President Obama just says, well, guess what? The rules, we're going to throw them out the window. We have now a country of arbitrary rules. And this is in contrast to what people talked about, or Hayek talked about, and others talked about, the rule of law. The rule of law is, yes, we do believe we should have government, we should have rules, and these are sort of signposts, like traffic signs for automobiles, but they're also out there for legal disputes and other disputes, so we have a civilly ordered society. But we're tending towards a society that has no rules, that is arbitrary law. We're also tending towards something that I think might be irrevocable and may lead to a calamity bigger than any of us can even imagine. You are doing well here right now with Toyota. Toyota's out competing GM, but what happens if Toyota goes bad? What happens if the economy gets so sour that Toyota goes bad? We have to understand, how do we get out of this and how do we get into this fix? We get into this fix through the business cycle. So we're in the bottom of the business cycle. But a lot of people just throw up their arms and say the mystery of the business cycle, it's like somehow gods or demons create this and it's endemic, or it's part of capitalism. Well, it's not exactly true. We have to look for causes, and we have to look beyond sort of first statements like that and say, why do we have a business cycle? Well, we got this business cycle. We got a huge boom in the housing industry for several reasons, but primarily because the Federal Reserve set the interest rates below the market rate. I tell people that interest rates are kind of like insulin. When you eat a big meal, which we're in the process of all ingesting right now your insulin's starting to go whoosh. It's going up, but it's going to tampen on the effect of too much sugar or too much blood glucose. That's the way interest rates are supposed to work. When an economy gets overheated, the interest rates will rise because there's more competition for the money, higher demand for the money, and you need to let interest rates rise. So what happens is maybe you don't have the 5-year housing boom, maybe it's a little bit less of a boom, and we have slower growth but more steady growth. But we got out of control. The home prices had gone up for 60 years very gradually, but in the last 5 years it went like this. It's just amazing, the charts, if you look at what happened. Another chart that was in the Wall Street Journal last week, Art Laffer has a chart, and it's the money supply. The money supply is doing this, just right along the base, and then it looks like an L that goes straight through the roof in the last 4 to 5 months. The last 6 months, the money supply has increased more than it has at any time since World War II. We now have a deficit that's 13% of the gross national product. We have spending that is 28% of the gross national product. My town, Bowling Green, they're all jumping up and down, and I hope your mayor's not that way, but our mayor just loves it. We got $1 million. But my question is, it has to come from somewhere. If no one asks the hard questions, you just take the $1 million, well, that's fine. But it's coming through deficit financing. It either is going to come through the Federal Reserve printing more money, which devalues and debases your currency. It's going to come through borrowing, but I think we're about at the limit on our borrowing. But we have to do something. But my question is why am I up here? Why am I traveling the state? Why am I putting my name out there for this U.S. Senate race? Is that we need to have a message. The Republican Party, to me, is an empty vessel unless we imbue it with something. We have to have ideas, and we have to be a part of these ideas, and we have to be able to articulate them. President Obama has articulated these ideas better than his ideas, better than our ideas. That's why they're winning. We need to be able to articulate our ideas, but not give up on our ideas and not give up on our message. But when President Obama introduced a $1.75 trillion deficit, do you know what the Republican whimper was? Oh, we'll have a $500 billion deficit. So they had a Republican alternative, $500 billion, and President Obama and the Democrats, $1.75 trillion. Where's the distinction? I mean, we also lost some of our way and lost some of our believability through the Bush years. And this will make me different than some Republicans. It may anger some Republicans that I say these things, but if we don't self-examine ourselves, we will not grow larger as a party. During the 8 years of George W. Bush, we doubled the debt from $5 trillion to $10 trillion. We added the largest entitlement program since LBJ, the Medicare Prescription Drug Plan. We're doing this through deficit financing. It's not like we have an abundance of money up there and we can say, oh, let's help some poor people with this money. We don't have the money. We're running up huge deficits. And I think ultimately there will be a penalty to pay that may be very, very dramatic. But we need to have a Republican alternative. One of my economic advisors, who's a professor at Western, last week we had a meeting in Lexington, and she had an analogy which I thought was pretty good. If the body politic is a seesaw and it's listing and leaning way to the left now, if we get our Republican leaders, a moderate or an ex-Democrat or someone who just is a career politician, we put them right in the center of the seesaw and we say, oh, we get him elected and he has an R next to his name, what good does it do that we have someone sitting in the center of the seesaw because we're still going to be leaning way left? We need someone who goes to Washington who says, look, the alternative should be a balanced budget. We may not win. We may get 39 votes or 35 votes in the Senate, or we may get 170 votes in the House, but our alternative should be a balanced budget. I no longer think that this is an academic question. I don't think it's parlor talk. I don't think we can talk about what's good or bad and where we're going. I think we have a looming crisis. People think we've been through the crisis. It may be worse. We have a looming crisis. Japan went through 15 years of this. There was a question asked to Bernanke that my father asked not too long ago. He said, what do you do if you have 10% inflation next year but zero growth? Because Bernanke's answer is always, we'll take money back out of the economy if it overheats. But they're presuming that there'll be inflation. There'll be growth. They're not going to take that money back out of the economy if there's no growth. So what do you do if you get higher and higher inflation and have zero growth? That's what happened in Japan. That's the stagflation that happened in the 1970s. People and Republicans in general like to say, our future generations will pay for this deficit. It's awful that we're passing it down to our kids and our grandkids. And I think that's true. But there's something that's even a little scarier that may be true. You may be beginning to pay for this deficit next year through higher prices.